Laura Collins stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow across her sharp features. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and adjusted her crisp white blouse, the fabric perfectly tailored to fit her form. With a deep breath, she began rehearsing her presentation for the upcoming board meeting, her voice steady but tinged with the dry sarcasm that had become second nature. "Good morning, everyone," she began, mimicking the overly enthusiastic tone of her boss. "Today, I'm here to enlighten you about the new marketing strategy that will undoubtedly lead us to success." She rolled her eyes at her reflection, her lips curling into a wry smile. Success, a word often tossed around like a religious mantra, as if it will save us from mediocrity. Laura paused, tilting her head as if considering the weight of her words. "Ah, faith," she continued, her tone dripping with mockery. "The belief in something without evidence. What a comforting crutch for the weak-minded. Trust in the Lord, they say. Please, I'd rather trust my analytical skills and a solid market analysis." As she practiced, the sound of laughter echoed from the street below, drawing her attention. She glanced out the window to see a group of children playing, their joy palpable. For a fleeting moment, she felt a strange pang in her chest, something she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. But she quickly dismissed it, shaking her head as if to clear her thoughts. "No time for sentimentality," she muttered to herself, returning her focus to the mirror. After several more rehearsals, Laura grabbed her briefcase and headed out the door, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. The drive to work was a routine she had perfected, her mind racing with thoughts of deadlines and meetings. She parked her car and made her way into the bustling office building, where the air was thick with ambition and caffeine. Once inside, she navigated through the maze of cubicles, her colleagues' chatter filling the space. As she approached the break room, she overheard a conversation that made her stop in her tracks. "Did you hear about the charity event at St. Michael's Church?" One of her coworkers, Jenna, exclaimed, her voice laced with excitement. "They're raising money for the local shelter. I think I'm going to volunteer." Laura scoffed, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorframe, her expression one of derision. "Volunteering? Really? You think spending your Saturday at a church will actually make a difference?" Jenna turned to her, a look of surprise mingled with disappointment. "It's not just about that, Laura. It's about giving back, helping those in need. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Helping those in need?" Laura shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You mean enabling them to rely on charity instead of taking charge of their own lives? Faith is just a fancy way of avoiding personal responsibility. People need to learn to fend for themselves, not lean on some imaginary savior." The room fell quiet, several pairs of eyes turning towards Laura. For a moment, she reveled in the discomfort her words created, the tension thick in the air. But then she caught a glimpse of Jenna's hurt expression, and her satisfaction began to wane. "Come on, Laura," another colleague, Tom, interjected, trying to lighten the mood. "It's just a charity event. You don't have to be so cynical about it." "Cynical? Me?" Laura raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "I'm just being realistic. You all know that life doesn't magically get better because you toss a few coins in a collection plate. People need to face their challenges head-on, not hide behind some archaic beliefs." With that, she turned on her heel, leaving the break room filled with murmurs and uncertain glances. As she made her way back to her office, Laura felt a familiar sense of triumph. She had challenged the status quo, disrupted the blind optimism of her coworkers. Yet beneath her bravado, a nagging feeling lingered, a whisper of doubt she refused to acknowledge. That evening, Laura and her friends gathered at their regular haunt, a lively bar tucked into a corner of the city. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter and chatter, the clinking of glasses punctuating the air. Laura settled into her usual spot at the bar, her friends surrounding her, eager to share stories from their week. "Did you hear about the charity event at the church?" One of her friends, Sarah, asked, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I'm thinking of signing up." Laura rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. What is it with you people and your fascination with faith? It's just a way to avoid dealing with reality. You really think a few hours spent pretending to care will solve anything?" The laughter around her faltered, and Laura felt a flicker of discomfort. What's wrong with wanting to help, Laura? Sarah challenged, her tone turning serious. Is it so bad to have hope? Hope, Laura scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Hope is just a nice way of saying you're deluding yourself. Life doesn't get better because you believe in something. It gets better when you take control. Faith is for the weak. The group fell silent, the air thick with tension. Laura glanced around, noticing the discomfort etched on her friends' faces, and for a moment, she felt a twinge of regret for her harsh words. But she quickly pushed it aside, burying the fleeting sense of empathy beneath her well-crafted armor of cynicism. Let's not get all serious, she said with a forced laugh, raising her glass. Here's to living in reality. Her friends clinked their glasses against hers, but the laughter felt hollow, and she could sense the underlying discomfort lingering in the air. As the night wore on, Laura continued her tirade against faith, drawing laughter and nods from her friends, while simultaneously creating a rift between them. She dismissed their concerns and poked fun at their beliefs, feeling a sense of power in her words. Yet deep down, a voice inside her nagged at her, reminding her of the moments she had chosen to ignore, the moments of vulnerability that she had buried beneath layers of sarcasm. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave, Laura felt the weight of her own convictions beginning to shift, as if the very foundation of her beliefs was being called into question. But she brushed it aside, determined to maintain her facade of unwavering confidence. After all, she was the master of her own fate, wasn't she? With a final wave goodbye to her friends, Laura stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling around her. As she walked to her car, the laughter from the bar faded into the background, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Tomorrow is just another day, she reminded herself. But deep down, she sensed that something was about to change. Something she had no control over. The morning sun slipped through the curtains of Laura Collins' apartment, casting slanted beams of light across her meticulously organized space. She had always prided herself on control, a quality that permeated every aspect of her life. Yet as she sipped her coffee, the bitter taste mirrored the cynicism that had become her default state. Today, however, would be different. Little did she know her routine was about to be disrupted by an unexpected encounter. As she stepped outside, the crisp air greeted her, invigorating yet charged with an unshakable feeling of anticipation. She walked briskly down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome, marking the tempo of her determined stride. Laura's mind was already racing with thoughts of the day ahead, a crucial meeting that required her undivided attention. As she rounded the corner, she collided with a figure standing too close to the edge of the street. "Oh, excuse me," she said, her voice tinged with irritation as she glanced up, ready to brush off this stranger. But her annoyance evaporated as she met the gaze of the man before her. He was tall, with dark, tousled hair and striking blue eyes that seemed to hold an unfathomable depth. There was something about him that felt oddly familiar, as if she had known him in another life. "Laura Collins, right?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I've been waiting for you." "Excuse me?" Laura raised an eyebrow, her skepticism flaring. "And you are?" "Elijah," he replied simply, his gaze unwavering. "I know a lot about you. More than you might expect." Laura's heart raced, but not out of excitement. "That's quite an assumption, don't you think? You must have me confused with someone else." She shot back, crossing her arms defensively. She was about to turn away when something in his expression stopped her. There was an intensity in his eyes, a knowing that sent a shiver down her spine. "No, I'm not confused," he said, his tone softening. "I'm here to challenge you, Laura, to challenge your beliefs and the way you see the world." "Challenge?" she echoed, letting out a laugh that was more mocking than amused. "I don't need anyone to challenge me, especially not some stranger on the street. I'm perfectly fine with how I see things." "Are you?" Elijah stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You think faith is just a crutch for the weak. But what if it's not? What if it's something more? What if it's the very thing that could lead you to understanding your own life?" Laura felt the urge to scoff, to dismiss him outright, but something held her back. "And what exactly do you know about my life?" she challenged, her voice sharper. "I know you've been hurt," he replied, his gaze piercing through her defenses. "I know you've built walls to protect yourself, but those walls are keeping you from experiencing real connection. You mock faith, yet you yearn for something deeper. Her breath caught in her throat. "You know nothing about me," she spat, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She could feel her heartbeat quickening, like a drum signaling an impending storm. "Maybe not everything," he admitted, taking a step back as if to give her space. "But I see potential in you. You're searching for meaning, even if you don't realize it. Don't you want to explore what lies beyond your skepticism?" Laura turned away, shaking her head, desperate to dismiss him. "I don't need a philosopher on the street corner telling me how to live my life," she retorted, her voice tinged with irritation. "Elijah, I don't have time for this," she continued, her patience wearing thin. "I have a meeting to prepare for, and unlike you, I can't afford to waste my time." "Yet here we are," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Maybe this is precisely the moment you needed." "Right," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I'll just chalk this up to a bad morning and go about my day." As she walked away, she could feel his gaze on her, an unsettling weight that lingered even as the distance grew between them. She shook her head, trying to rid herself of the encounter. The rest of her day was filled with meetings and deadlines, but Elijah's words echoed in her mind like a haunting melody she couldn't quite shake. Days passed, and her life continued in a familiar rhythm: work, friends, and the occasional escapade at the bar. Yet a series of strange occurrences began to weave through her routine, unsettling her in ways she couldn't articulate. Items she swore she had lost would inexplicably reappear, often in the most unexpected places. Her keys, which she had searched for frantically one morning, turned up in the refrigerator. A book she had lent to a friend found its way back to her bookshelf, though she had not seen it for months. "Laura, you're losing it," her friend Sarah teased one evening at the bar as Laura recounted the bizarre happenings. "Maybe you should lay off the late-night wine." "I'm telling you, it's like the universe is messing with me," Laura replied, her laughter strained. "It's ridiculous." "Or you're just stressed from work," Sarah suggested, taking a sip of her drink. "You've been working too hard. Maybe it's time to relax a little, or find a nice guy to distract you." "Yeah, right," Laura scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Men are the last thing I need. I'm perfectly capable of handling my life on my own." But as she spoke, a lingering thought crept into her mind, the memory of Elijah and their strange encounter. His words lingered like a shadow, challenging her to confront her beliefs about faith and connection. The vivid dreams began shortly after, dreams that felt more like vivid memories than fabrications of her imagination. Dreams of a warm light, of laughter, of moments of pure joy intertwined with shadows of pain and loss. One night, she found herself standing in a vast field, the sky painted in hues of gold and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Elijah appeared again, standing at the edge of the field, his silhouette outlined against the fading light. He looked at her with a knowing smile, and as she approached, the field transformed into a swirling storm of emotions: fear, hope, and longing. "Why do you resist?" he asked, his voice echoing in the dreamscape. "You have the power to change your perspective, to embrace the unknown." "Stop it!" Laura shouted, frustration boiling over. "You're not real. This isn't real." "Isn't it?" he countered, stepping closer, his eyes piercing through her defenses. "What if this is precisely what you need to confront?" She woke with a start, her heart racing, the remnants of the dream clinging to her like a shroud. The boundary between her skepticism and an emerging curiosity began to blur, leaving her feeling disoriented. Days turned into a week, and each passing day brought her closer to an inexplicable pull toward Elijah. As she prepared for work one morning, she caught her reflection in the mirror, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Was she really so certain about everything? Or was there a part of her that craved something beyond her carefully constructed facade? The thought lingered, plaguing her even as she left the apartment. In the days that followed, she found herself scanning the streets, half expecting to see Elijah lurking in the shadows. He became a phantom in her mind, a specter that challenged her to confront her own beliefs. Yet despite the strange occurrences and the vivid dreams, she remained steadfast in her mockery of faith, maintaining her stance with an iron grip. "Laura, you should really lighten up," Sarah said during lunch one day. You're acting like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. I have plenty on my plate, thank you very much. Laura snapped, but her words felt hollow even to her own ears. The truth was, she was beginning to feel the weight of her own skepticism, a burden she had carried for far too long. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, casting a warm glow over the town, Laura caught a glimpse of Elijah in the distance. He stood outside a quaint coffee shop, his presence radiating an aura of calm amidst the chaos of her thoughts. With a deep breath, she approached him, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what she would say or how she would confront the whirlwind of emotions he stirred within her. "Laura," he said, a smile breaking across his face as she drew near. "I knew you'd come." "Don't get any ideas," she replied, attempting to mask her vulnerability with bravado. "I'm not here to have a philosophical debate." "Maybe not," he replied, his tone gentle yet knowing, "but perhaps it's time to explore what lies beneath the surface of your skepticism." And as they stood there, the world around them faded away, leaving only an unspoken connection that tugged at Laura's heart, urging her to confront the very beliefs she had spent a lifetime mocking. She wasn't yet ready to embrace faith, but for the first time she realized that perhaps it was worth exploring. The unknown beckoned, and she found herself drawn to it, even if it terrified her. Laura Collins sat in the boardroom, her heart racing as she prepared for the presentation that would determine her fate at work. The sleek glass walls of the room reflected the unease she felt within. Today was supposed to be a showcase of her hard work, the culmination of weeks of late nights and relentless effort. Yet as she glanced around at her colleagues, their expressions a mix of boredom and judgment. A wave of anxiety washed over her. "Get it together, Laura," she muttered under her breath, trying to shake off the creeping doubt. She had always prided herself on being the master of her destiny, a self-made woman who scoffed at the notion of divine intervention. "I don't need any higher power to succeed," she thought, her mind racing back to the conversations she'd overheard in the office about faith and charity. "It's all nonsense." But as she stepped up to the front, her confidence started to waver. The projector whirred to life, and she advanced through her slides, her voice firm at first. "Our new marketing strategy will revolutionize our approach, boosting sales by 30% in just 6 months, she proclaimed, her voice reverberating through the room. Yet with each passing moment, she felt the weight of their skepticism bearing down on her. Halfway through her presentation, Laura stumbled over a particularly complicated statistic. If we look at the data from last year," she trailed off, her mind blanking. There was a snicker from the back of the room, and her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She attempted to regain her composure, but the laughter grew louder, mocking her. "This is just a waste of time," one of her colleagues shouted, derailing her thoughts even further. "Let's wrap this up, shall we?" Another chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The humiliation crashed over Laura like a cold wave, drowning out her once fiery resolve. "I don't need to be here," she thought, the words echoing in her mind. She felt small, insignificant, and utterly defeated. As she gathered her things and hurried out of the room, she could feel the stares of her colleagues burning into her back. It was only when she reached the solitude of her car that the reality of her situation hit her. She leaned her head against the steering wheel, tears of frustration brimming in her eyes. "Why do I even care?" she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew it was more than just a failed presentation. It was a culmination of her life choices. The relationships she'd sacrificed for her career, and the walls she'd built around herself. Seeking solace, Laura wandered into a quaint local bookstore she often passed but had never entered. The smell of aged paper and the soft light filtering through the windows enveloped her like a warm hug. She walked through the aisles, running her fingers across the spines of books. Titles on spirituality, self-help, and faith caught her eye, and she paused to consider them. "What a joke," she scoffed, shaking her head. "As if a book will fix anything." Yet as she turned to leave, one book seemed to call out to her. The Journey Within, Finding Faith in a Skeptical World. She picked it up, its cover adorned with serene landscapes and hopeful imagery. The title resonated with her, and despite her better judgment, she felt a flicker of curiosity. Maybe it's worth a look, she thought, tucking the book under her arm. Later that evening, Laura settled into her favorite chair at home, the book resting on her lap. She flipped it open hesitantly, her mind racing with skepticism. The first few pages were filled with anecdotes of people finding faith during their darkest moments. "This is just a bunch of fluff," she muttered, but as she read on, a strange sensation washed over her. The stories resonated with her own struggles, and she found herself captivated against her will. Hours passed as she lost herself in the pages, the words weaving a tapestry of hope and redemption that was both foreign and oddly familiar. Just as she was beginning to feel a shift within her, she closed the book and tossed it aside, discontented. "There's no way this could apply to me," she insisted to herself, shaking her head as if to dispel the thoughts that had begun to creep in. That night, sleep eluded her, and her mind was plagued by vivid dreams. In one particularly unsettling dream, she found herself standing in a vast, empty landscape, the sky a swirling mass of dark clouds. And then, there he was, Elijah, the mysterious stranger who had challenged her. Views on faith. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, and she felt an inexplicable urge to approach him. "Elijah!" she called out, her voice echoing in the desolation. "What do you want from me?" "Laura," he replied softly, his eyes piercing through the darkness. "Your mocking nature has consequences. You must understand that your words have power, and the way you dismiss faith is leading you down a dangerous path." She felt anger flare within her. "You don't know me. I don't need faith or any of this nonsense to succeed. I make my own choices." "But at what cost?" he asked, tilting his head as if he could see right through her bravado. "Your choices are isolating you from the very connections that can bring you joy. You mock what you fear." "Fear? I don't fear anything?" she shot back, but felt a crack in her facade. Deep down, she knew he was touching on something true. "Then why do you feel so alone?" he pressed, the weight of his words hanging in the air like an unshakable truth. Laura woke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The remnants of the dream clung to her, leaving her unsettled and more confused than ever. She sat up, the morning light streaming through her window, illuminating her messy apartment. "What does he know?" she murmured, though the question lingered in her mind, refusing to be dismissed. The day unfolded with an air of uncertainty. Laura found herself unable to focus on work, her thoughts drifting back to Elijah and the strange warning he had given her. Mocking nature will lead to dire consequences. The words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of her own dismissive tendencies. As she walked through the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching her, judging her. She overheard whispers about her failed presentation and felt the sting of their laughter again. "They're right," she thought bitterly. "I've made a mess of things." Desperate for distraction, she opened her laptop and found herself scrolling through articles on faith and spirituality. "What am I doing?" she thought, incredulous at her own actions. Yet as she read, she felt an odd sense of comfort wash over her. Perhaps there was something to the stories of faith she had long dismissed. The day faded into evening, and Laura found herself back at the bookstore, clutching the book she had initially dismissed. She settled into a corner and began to read again, her heart pounding with a mix of skepticism and hope. The words began to resonate in a way they hadn't before, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of something she thought had long faded: possibility. As she closed the book, the weight of her cynicism felt a little lighter. "Maybe there's something here after all," she whispered to herself, though doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. But deep down, she knew she was standing at the precipice of change, and despite her fears, she was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Laura Collins sat at the small cafe table, absently stirring her iced coffee as she listened to the animated chatter of her friends around her. The sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the lively gathering, yet she felt an inexplicable chill within. It wasn't just the remnants of the storm that had rolled through the previous night, leaving the air thick with humidity and tension. It was something deeper, a gnawing discomfort that had been festering in her since her last encounter with Elijah. "Laura, are you even listening?" Sarah, her closest friend, waved a hand in front of Laura's face, breaking her reverie. "You've been awfully quiet today. We're sharing our plans for the summer, and you're just here. Laura blinked, forcing a smile. Sorry, just thinking about work. You know how it is. Right, the all-important career, Mark chimed in, his tone laced with playful sarcasm. I swear you'd sell your soul to the corporate devil for another promotion. Very funny, Mark, Laura shot back, though his words hit closer to home than she cared to admit. The reality was that she had sacrificed much for her career, but lately she was beginning to wonder if it had all been worth it. She glanced out the window, watching the clouds gather ominously on the horizon, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. Seriously, though, Sarah continued, her voice softening, you can talk to us. We're your friends. If something's bothering you— It's nothing, Laura interrupted a bit too sharply. I've been feeling a little off lately. Off? Like how? You're not sick, are you? Mark leaned forward, concern etched across his face. No, just questioning things, I guess. Life, choices. Laura paused, collecting her thoughts. You ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Like you're stuck in this endless loop? Sarah exchanged a worried glance with Mark before leaning in closer. What do you mean? You've always been the one with everything figured out. The successful career, the social life, Yeah, but that's just the surface. Inside, it feels different. I don't know. Empty, maybe? Empty? Mark echoed, incredulous. You? Come on, you're the life of the party. You don't get to feel empty? Laura chuckled bitterly, shaking her head. Sometimes, it's the loudest people who feel the most alone. As the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Laura remained detached, her mind wandering back to Elijah. The way he had looked at her, with those piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her facade. He had challenged her in a way that was both infuriating and intriguing. The dreams had intensified since their first meeting, each one more vivid than the last. Each one a reflection of her past failures, her broken relationships, and the walls she had built around her heart. Hey, Laura! Earth to Laura! Mark's voice broke through her thoughts once more. What? She snapped, feeling a surge of irritation. Wow, someone really is in their own world today, he said, laughing uneasily. We were just discussing the concert next month. You in? Sure, sounds great, she replied, her heart not in it. Come on, you can't just say yes without any enthusiasm, Sarah teased, nudging her playfully. What's going on with you? You're not your usual self. I told you I'm just— Laura hesitated, searching for the right words. I'm just tired of pretending everything's perfect. Pretending? Mark raised an eyebrow. You don't have to put on a show for us, you know. We're your friends. Just be real with us. The weight of his words hung in the air as Laura considered them. I guess I'm just scared. Scared of failing again. Of being vulnerable. I've been so focused on my career and— On what? Hiding from your emotions? Sarah interjected gently. Laura, we all have our struggles. You're not alone in this. As if on cue, dark clouds rolled in, casting shadows over the cafe. The atmosphere shifted, and the once bustling chatter began to fade into an uneasy silence. Just then, the first drops of rain pattered against the window, quickly intensifying into a downpour. Wow, what a storm! Mark exclaimed, glancing outside. We should probably move inside. Just as the group was about to gather their things, the cafe's lights flickered ominously. Laura's heart raced. What is it with this weather? She whispered, feeling a sense of foreboding wash over her. Let's just wait it out, Sarah suggested, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. It'll pass. But as the storm raged on, Laura felt an inexplicable urge to leave. The walls of the cafe seemed to close in around her, amplifying her anxiety. And then through the torrential rain, she saw him. Elijah stood across the street, seemingly unaffected by the storm, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Laura, what are you staring at? Mark asked, following her gaze. Her heart raced as she turned to her friends. I think I need to go. Go? Are you serious? It's a monsoon out there, Sarah protested. I know, but Laura's voice caught in her throat as Elijah took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. He raised a hand, as if beckoning her to come closer. "I'll be right back," she muttered, hardly hearing her friend's protests as she pushed through the cafe door, the storm hitting her like a wall of cold water. "Laura!" she heard Sarah shout, but it was too late. The rain soaked through her clothes as she hurried across the street, her gaze fixed on him. "Elijah!" she called, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. He turned, a slight smile breaking through the intensity of his expression. "Laura?" he replied, his voice calm amid the chaos. "You came." "What are you doing here?" she asked, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. "Why do you keep showing up?" "The storm outside mirrors the storm within you," he said cryptically, taking a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "You're at a crossroads and you know it." "Crossroads?" she echoed, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" "Your heart is heavy with unaddressed fears. You've built walls to protect yourself, but they're also keeping you from feeling, truly feeling." Laura felt a lump in her throat. "I don't know what you want from me. I'm not looking for some inspirational speech. I'm not here to inspire you, Laura. I'm here to challenge you. You can keep running from your past, or you can face it head on. The choice is yours." "Face it? What do you know about my past? You don't know anything about me," she shot back, anger flaring in her chest. "Do you really believe that?" His gaze pierced through her defenses. "Or are you just afraid of what you might discover?" The rain continued to pour, but in that moment, Laura felt a shift within her, a flicker of realization. Elijah was right. She was terrified of facing the truth, of acknowledging her failures, her insecurities. And yet, there, he stood challenging her to confront the very things she had buried deep within. "Why do you care?" she finally asked, her voice shaking. "Why do you keep coming back?" "Because I see you, Laura. I see the potential in you, and I know that you can break free from the chains of your past, but you have to want it." As the storm raged on, Laura felt the weight of his words settle within her. The chaos outside echoed the turmoil in her heart, and for the first time, she was tempted to confront it. But could she? Would she have the courage to face her fears and unravel the tightly knit fabric of her carefully constructed life? "Laura!" The distant voice of her friends broke through the haze of her thoughts, reminding her of the world she had left behind. She glanced back, seeing them huddled under the cafe's awning, worry etched on their faces. "Laura!" Mark shouted again, and she felt a tug of loyalty to her friends, the ones who had always been there for her, even when she dismissed their concerns. She hesitated, torn between the comfort of familiarity and the uncertainty of the unknown. "Think about it," Elijah urged, his voice steady, unwavering. "You have the power to change your narrative, but it starts with facing the truth." As the rain continued to fall, Laura stood at the crossroads, the storm swirling around her, a reflection of her own inner turmoil. In that moment, she realized that the journey ahead would demand more than just confrontation. It would require vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to embrace the unknown. With one last look at Elijah, she turned back toward her friends, feeling the pull of their unwavering support. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The storm might be raging outside, but the real tempest was brewing within her, and she was ready to confront it. Laura awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across her bedroom, but the sight that greeted her was far from comforting. Papers were strewn across the floor, her filing cabinet ajar, and the unmistakable signs of a break-in were all around. Panic gripped her as she bolted out of bed, her mind racing. "What the hell happened here?" she muttered, her voice shaky. She rushed to her desk, scanning for the most important items. Her work documents, her laptop, her journals. Everything she had meticulously organized now lay in disarray, as if a tornado had swept through her life, leaving chaos in its wake. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a stark reminder that life went on beyond her chaotic reality. She grabbed it, her fingers shaking as she dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report a break-in," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I live at 123 Maple Street. Please hurry." After hanging up, she paced the room, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Why would someone target me, she thought, her cynicism creeping back in. Do they want my soul? She chuckled bitterly at the absurdity of the notion, but quickly dismissed it. The idea of faith and divine intervention felt foreign now, especially given her current situation. As she waited for the police, she felt a strange sense of vulnerability wash over her, not just from the break-in, but from the realization that she had been living in a bubble of her own making, dismissing everything she once deemed weak or irrelevant. Her mind drifted to Elijah, his piercing gaze, his unsettling calmness in the face of her mockery. If only he were here now, she sighed, wishing for the enigmatic man who had somehow stirred something deep within her. Minutes later, the police arrived, their presence bringing a semblance of order to the chaos. Laura explained the situation, her voice steadying as she recounted the details. "I'm not sure what's missing," she admitted, her brow furrowing in concentration. "But I know my work files were here, and I had important documents in that cabinet." The officer nodded, taking notes. "We'll do our best to find out what happened, but I advise you to consider increasing your security measures. It's unsettling to have your privacy invaded like this." As the officers conducted their investigation, Laura felt an increasing sense of helplessness. "I'm the master of my fate," she had always told herself, but standing here, less than in control, those words felt hollow. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control. Once the officers left, she collapsed onto her couch, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her shoulders. "I need to talk to Elijah," she whispered to herself, the thought echoing in her mind. She picked up her phone to send him a message, her fingers hovering over the screen as uncertainty washed over her. Would he even respond? Did he want to help her? And most importantly, could he help her face whatever was happening in her life? Before she could overthink it any further, she hit send. "Elia, it's Laura. I need your help. Things have gone terribly wrong. Please come." Time seemed to stretch as she waited. Each tick of the clock echoed in the silence of her apartment, amplifying her anxiety. Just as she began to doubt whether he would come, there was a knock on the door. Her heart raced again, hope mingling with fear as she opened it to reveal Elijah standing there, his expression unreadable. "Laura," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I felt you needed me." His presence was both comforting and unnerving, a paradox that Laura couldn't quite reconcile. "Things are a mess," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I had a break-in this morning. Important things are missing, and I don't know what to do." She gestured to the chaos in her apartment, feeling exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated. Elijah studied the room, his brow furrowing slightly. "This isn't just about the break-in, is it?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "No, it's not," Laura admitted, crossing her arms defensively. "I've been feeling like my life is unraveling. I've pushed away everything I thought I didn't need, faith, connections, even my own emotions. Sometimes facing our fears is the only way to reclaim control," he replied. He moved closer, his presence grounding her amidst the turmoil. "You've built walls around yourself, Laura, but true strength lies in vulnerability." "Vulnerability?" she scoffed, trying to mask her discomfort. "That's just a fancy way of saying weakness." "No, it's not. It's the foundation of growth," Elijah stated firmly, his gaze unwavering. "You can't avoid what scares you forever. You need to confront it." She opened her mouth to retort but paused, his words resonating deep within her. "What do you know about fear?" she challenged, feeling the heat of anger rise in her chest. "You don't know me, Elijah." "Maybe I don't know the specifics of your life," he replied, his voice softening. "But I see the fear in your eyes, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of losing control. It's consuming you." Laura looked away, a lump forming in her throat. "What do you suggest I do then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Embrace it," he said simply. "Start by allowing yourself to feel what you're afraid of. Then, take small steps towards facing those fears. You've dismissed faith for so long, perhaps it's time to explore what it means to you." His words hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation all at once. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "You can," Elijah said, his tone resolute, "but only if you allow yourself to try. Take a chance on faith, however small it may be. You might be surprised at what you find." As he spoke, Laura felt a flicker of something within her. A glimmer of hope, perhaps, or the faintest stirrings of an emerging belief. Maybe, she said slowly, maybe I can try. Good, he smiled, a warmth spreading through the room. Start with the charity event you used to mock. Go there, see what it's about. You don't have to commit to anything, just observe. Laura hesitated, but something about Elijah's encouragement ignited a flicker of curiosity within her. I'll think about it, she said, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. Thinking is the first step, he replied, and for the first time she saw a hint of pride in his eyes. As they spoke, she felt a shift within herself, a small crack in the armor she had built over the years. Maybe it was time to explore the unknown, to face her fears head-on. For the first time in a long while, Laura felt a sense of possibility blooming in her heart, a feeling she had long dismissed as irrelevant. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she realized that perhaps faith was not as foreign as she had once believed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the charity event, Laura Collins stood at the entrance of the community center, her heart racing. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter and animated conversations, a stark contrast to her own inner turmoil. She had reluctantly decided to attend the event, the very gathering she had once scoffed at, but something deep within her felt drawn to it, an impulse she could no longer ignore. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the decorations, the tables laden with homemade dishes, and the bright smiles of families mingling together. Among the crowd, a small stage had been erected, and a local pediatrician was preparing to share stories of the children who benefited from the community's generosity. As she moved further inside, Laura caught sight of a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, standing beside her mother, clutching a bright red balloon. The child's face radiated joy, a stark reminder of the innocence Laura had long since abandoned. "Can you believe this?" a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Clara, her old college friend, who had always championed causes like this. "I mean, look at all the people here. It's amazing how everyone came together to support the kids." "Yeah, amazing," Laura replied, though her tone was laced with skepticism. "But I still don't see how a few donations can actually change lives." Clara rolled her eyes playfully. "You've got to open your heart a little, Laura. You might be surprised at what you find." Laura smirked. "I'm not sure that's my style. I prefer to rely on evidence, not faith." As Clara walked away to greet another friend, Laura felt a tug at her sleeve. Turning, she found the little girl with the balloon looking up at her, eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you going to help the children too?" the girl asked innocently, her voice a soft melody against the background noise. Laura stammered, caught off guard. "I'm just here to observe, I guess." The girl tilted her head. "But observing doesn't help. You have to do something, just like my mom does. She says helping others makes your heart feel big." Laura felt a strange warmth wash over her, an unfamiliar sensation that tugged at the corners of her hardened heart. "Your mom sounds wise," she replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe I should take a page out of her book." "Yeah, you should," the girl beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. "You could even help with the balloons. They make everyone happy." Before Laura could respond, the pediatrician took the stage, his voice commanding attention as he shared touching stories of children whose lives had been transformed through community efforts. As he spoke of a boy named Samuel who had been gravely ill but had found hope through the support of the townspeople, Laura felt a lump form in her throat. This was not what she had expected. She had anticipated a dull evening filled with obligatory speeches and platitudes, but instead she found herself captivated. The room erupted in applause as the pediatrician concluded his speech with a call to action, urging everyone to dig deep and contribute to a fund that would help families in need. Laura felt her resolve wavering as she clapped alongside the crowd. For the first time, she questioned her long-held beliefs. Could there really be something more significant at play than mere coincidence? Was it possible that these connections, this sense of community, were a form of grace she had never acknowledged? Just then, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, shattering her contemplative moment. Fumbling, she pulled it out, glancing at the caller ID. The name made her heart drop. David. It was the name she had avoided for years, the ghost of a past she thought she had buried deep. Taking a deep breath, she answered, her voice steady despite the dread pooling in her stomach. "Hello," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Laura, it's David. We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "It's about Elijah." The name sent a jolt of electricity through her. "Elijah? What do you mean?" she stammered, her mind racing back to the mysterious man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. "He's not who you think he is. You need to know the truth. It's important. For both of you." Laura's heart pounded in her chest. The room around her began to blur as David continued, revealing connections that tied Elijah to a tragic event from her past, a car accident that had claimed the life of someone she had loved dearly. The weight of his words crashed over her like a tidal wave, enveloping her in confusion and disbelief. "David, stop! I can't—" She tried to interject, but he pressed on. "Laura, you need to understand. This isn't just about you anymore. This is bigger than you think. You have to confront it." As he spoke, Laura felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. The sense of safety she had clung to was slipping away, replaced by a harsh reality she had long avoided. She could see Elijah's face in her mind, the way he had looked at her with such understanding, as if he could see through her defenses. Had it all been a lie? A manipulative game of fate? "I can't," she said again, her voice trembling. "I need time to process this." "Time is running out, Laura. You have to decide what you believe. You can't hide from this anymore." With that, the call ended, leaving her standing in the midst of the crowd, feeling utterly alone. The laughter and chatter around her faded into a distant hum, and all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. Her world had shifted in an instant, and she was left grappling with a revelation that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. "Are you okay?" The little girl's voice broke through her thoughts, and Laura looked down to see the child gazing up at her with concern. I don't know," Laura admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I need to sit down for a moment." "Can I come with you?" the girl asked, her innocence a stark contrast to Laura's spiraling emotions. "Of course," Laura replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. As they found a quiet corner, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. The sense of dread gnawed at her, whispering that the mysteries surrounding Elijah were far deeper than she could fathom. As the night wore on, Laura found herself lost in thought, questioning everything she had once dismissed. Was faith merely a construct of the weak, or was there a greater force at play in her life? The answers eluded her, leaving her at a crossroads, ready to confront the past she had tried so hard to forget. The crowd continued to celebrate around her, but Laura felt a storm brewing within her, one that promised to unravel the very fabric of her existence. She knew that to move forward, she would have to face the truth about Elijah and the shadows of her past. The night was far from over, and the revelations that awaited her would challenge everything she had ever believed.